Okay, well, look, this is great. Thank you, first of all, for letting me participate this way. I know the clock has started, so I just want to give you a sense of what this thing called the Future Fit Business Benchmark is all about. It may be a resource that's useful to you in some of the deliberations that you are undertaking in your neck of the woods. I'm going to talk about 5 things related to that, who it is that's putting it together. In fact, let me just start with that. There are a couple of us that are leading the writing of the document, but we've had hundreds of people over the last couple of years contribute to the thinking behind it. We've had one public draft of it out already, and then another one is about to be released, and I'll tell you more about what's in that in a second. But let me just start off with the why. Why are we doing this? And basically, it's because we're being driven by 2 questions, pretty basic questions. One of them is, how would we recognize a truly sustainable, fit for the future, future-proof company if we ever saw one? If a company put up its hand and said, okay, we're done, we're sustainable, we're finished, we're doing the right things on water and materials and waste and greenhouse gases and so on, we're done, would we agree with them? How would we know? What would we look for? And where's the science to support that? And that also ties into how much is enough. Are we asking companies simply to continuously improve on their use of water materials and so on, or is there some end point at which they will have done all the right things? So those are the 2 questions. How would we know one if we saw one, and how much is enough? Basically what we're talking about is trying to understand when a business is going to be fit for the future. So we're calling it a future fit business, and this is how we're describing it. It's a business that can create net positive environmental, social, and economic value throughout its value chain. And as you can see in the diagram on the left, the way in which these 3 different ingredients of sustainability work is we have nested interdependencies, that essentially business is a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment, and so is society. And the health of those 2 nests, the environment and society, are important not only to you and me, but also to businesses. So we want to make sure that the business is doing the right things for those things. And in fact, there's a John Ehrenfeld version of this that some of you may identify with, that the business can contribute to at least to the possibility that business, society, and the environment will all flourish on the planet forever. And in effect, one last way of expressing this is that if the business decided or wanted to operate forever, it would not only do no damage or harm to the nests, but it would actually do very well by doing some net good. So that's the definition. And the question is, of course, is it possible? And how do we actually measure how companies are doing on these things? And so far, we've been using 3 benchmarks to gauge how companies are doing on their sustainability efforts, and we think it's time for a 4th. Basically, what we're talking about is when a company is measuring how it's doing today, if the rectangle that you see is the yellow rectangle there is the company, it measures its performance today against how it used to do last year or some other baseline year, how it would like to do its goals for the future and whether it's on track to meet those goals, and how it's doing compared to how other companies are doing on similar kinds of things. And those benchmarks are excellent, they're helpful, they're useful, but we think that there would be another benchmark that would be even more interesting and worth considering for companies, and that is what we're calling the Future Fit Business Benchmark, for a business that is truly fit for the future, so that we know not only how well it's doing compared to its own goals, but ultimately what the goals are, science-based goals, for its performance on environmental and social things. So it can then compare its performance against that benchmark. It can compare other companies' performance against that benchmark. So we still get the benefits of the other benchmarks, except what we're doing is comparing them to a more science-based definition of where they need to be if they're going to be truly sustainable. So that's kind of the positioning of what this is all about. How are we doing this? Well, the the unique value add that I think we're bringing to it is that it's based not on opinion so much as on science, the best available science. So what we're doing is we're looking at the basic science principles for how the world works, how those interconnected nests work for a sustainable human society on a finite planet. Then we look at the design principles for a business that's going to honor those science-based principles for any actor on the planet. And then we come up with goals that it needs to aspire to if it's going to perform at the right level to fulfill those design principles, and some key performance indicators so that we can assess how it's doing against those goals. We're going through multiple iterations of this. Right now we've got around 20 goals that are based on science. I'll just give you a sneak peek at what those goals are. There are 19 of them right now. There'll probably be around 20 or maybe 21 by the time we put out the next version of this. Some of them are environmental goals. Some of them are social goals. It's about half and half. And as you can see, there are the usual suspects that we're talking about in terms of goals. How much energy and the kind of energy a company should use, how much water it should use, how much materials or the kind of materials it should use, its respect for land use. And then we get into various kinds of emissions or pollutants, potentially harmful substance coming from its operations or its products, greenhouse gases from its operations or its products, and making sure that the company is being careful about designing products that can be repurposed at the end of their useful life. Pretty basic stuff. And frankly, the environmental goals are the easiest because the science is a little bit further along than it is on the social side. And on the social side, we're talking about how the company treats three different groups of stakeholders. Its employees, the community in which it's operating, and customers that it's serving with its products and services. You'll notice the footnote at the bottom that says that in effect we're talking about here not just the company's own operations, but its extended operations throughout all of its facilities, including its supply chain. So what we're talking about here is accountability that stretches through the whole value chain. As you can see in the second footnote at the bottom, we're working on these goals, and within about 2 or 3 weeks, we will have a version released, which is the next iteration of the goals, along with some key performance indicators associated with those, so we can figure out how to measure our progress. So who is this for? There are 6 audiences that we hope will find this useful. One, of course, is companies themselves. And by the way, it's any size company in any sector, anywhere in the world. So it would work for a small company in Grand Rapids or a large company in New York. It doesn't matter what sector it's in. The environment really doesn't care what you're doing or where you are, as long as you're not doing it any harm. So we're talking about companies being the primary audience, but the way in which we get them to pay attention to this is through those influencers who companies listen to, primarily investors who are trying to decide whether to put their money into that company and make sure that the company is a low risk and it's fit for the future, some of the issues that are going to be on the horizon. And also raters and standards organizations like the Global Reporting Initiative, the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, the UN Global Compact, ISO 26000, and all of the other acronyms that are out there for organizations that have standards that are used to assess how companies are doing. And we would like to integrate these goals into those standards. And of course, it might be useful to consultants that are trying to move companies on their journey or help them do that, business schools that are trying to come up with sustainable business models, and of course, policymakers. So 6 audiences, the first 3 are the primary ones. And in fact, with our the influencer strategies, we're trying to work through investors and raters to get at companies, and that's the plan. So speaking of the plan, let me just give you a 1-slide summary of what this is all about. So what we're trying to do, based on best available science, there may be better science someday, but we're using what we've got. We're defining the necessary and sufficient set of goals and their associated measures of progress, or how to measure progress, key performance indicators, for any company that wants to be fit for the future on a different kind of planet. And it's pretty clear that the planet is going to be different from what it was for the last 250 years since the start of the Industrial Revolution. We're starting to hit some planetary boundaries. As you can see on the right-hand side, we released the first draft of what this looks like with just the goals in last October. This June, we're going to be releasing revised goals and the key performance indicators for public feedback, and I invite all of you to take a look at that website. The URL in the yellow rectangle will have this second draft on it in early June, and then in October we'll put out the first official version of this, which we will then update occasionally as the requirement is realized. On the left-hand side, you can see that this is a free open source resource from a foundation called the Future Fit Foundation in the UK. Jeff Kendall, who is the CEO of that foundation, and I are writing this document. The benchmark is going to be hopefully integrated into other standards, and it's the first of 5 benchmarks. So this one is for businesses, for-profit businesses, and we get this one out by 2015. That is the end of this year. We want to have other benchmarks out in by 2017, one for municipalities, one for academic institutions, universities, colleges, and schools, one for not-for-profit or non-governmental organizations, NGOs themselves, and possibly another one for households, although, boy, that one's going to be tough. So by 2017, we'll have this one and the other 4 out. By 2020, have a critical mass of the major players in some of those sectors on board. By 2025, the ripple effect will have kicked in, and we'll have everybody talking on the same wavelength around what sustainability means, and will save the world. So that's kind of where we're going with this. It's a bit of an ambitious effort. I've been working on it for the last 3 years, and it's very exciting to see it get to the point that we're about to go public with something that hopefully will be a useful resource in your deliberations on what you want to do and how far you want to go with what you're doing on the sustainability front. Thanks for the opportunity.